a report by the Department of Economic Affairs under the Ministry of Finance has now said that the immediate impact of the US tariffs on Indian exporters appears limited, but the ripple effects on the economy at large must be addressed. Now, this report, viewers, mentions that the secondary and the tertiary effects of the US tariffs on the economy can pose a real challenge. And according to the report, the initial impact on exporters is contained, but the broader effects could emerge in areas such as supply chains, inflationary trends, and also the competitiveness of Indian goods in the global market. Now, viewers, this report by the Finance Ministry said that the ongoing India-US trade negotiations will therefore be very crucial. India is pursuing as of now a diversified trade strategy with which of course includes its recent trade deals with UK and also some European nations. Remember, it also is engaging in talks with New Zealand, European Union, among others, to sustain its resilient trade performance. However, these initiatives will of course take some time to show results and may not fully address the shortfall in exports to the US that may arise if the current tariff rate, which of course is at 50% on India, persists, according to this report by the Finance Ministry now. This is the latest we're getting in. A report has now been released by the Department of Economic Affairs. It comes under the Ministry of Finance, and it now says that the immediate impact on US tariffs on Indian exports, it appears to be limited, but of course the ripple effects on the economy at large, they will need to be addressed in time. Now, viewers, this report mentions that the secondary and the tertiary effects of the US tariffs on the economy will of course pose a real challenge. And according to this report, the initial impact on exports has been contained, but the broader effects could emerge. Now, they've also pointed out the areas in which these broader impacts could be seen, including supply chains, inflationary trends, and also the competitiveness of Indian goods in global market. Remember, India has competitors in the form of Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and all of these countries has a lesser tariffs from the US compared to India. Now, the report by the Finance Ministry also says that the ongoing India-US trade negotiations will of course be crucial. Remember, the negotiations have been going on, and the latest round of talks that was set to take place, they were halted. US officials, basically trade negotiators, they were supposed to travel to New Delhi, but that of course did not happen. And now the report says that the ongoing trade negotiations will be very crucial in terms of the broader impact that tariffs would have on Indian economy. Now, remember, India is pursuing a diversified trade strategy as of now. It has concluded its trade deal with UK, some European nations as well. And at the same time, it's also engaging with other countries, including New Zealand. You also have European Union. And all of this to sustain its resilient trade performance. Remember, Indian economy has been performing very well globally. And of course, the thing remains that all of these initiatives which are now being taken by New Delhi, they will take some time to show results and of course may not fully address the shortfall that will come in when these tariffs now that have kicked in, and they will be impacting the exports of India to the US. So this is the crucial report that has now come out by the Department of Economic Affairs under the Ministry of Finance, clearly saying that the immediate impact of the 50% tariffs imposed by the US, it has been contained, it will be limited, but we will need to look at the broader impact these tariffs will have on the Indian economy. Now, the report also mentions here that the secondary and the tertiary effects of the US tariffs on the economy pose a real challenge. And according to this report, viewers, the initial impact on exports has been contained, but the broader effect will emerge in areas such as supply chains, inflationary trends, and also the competitiveness of Indian goods in global markets. So, three areas where the impact could be seen in the coming days or months, in fact. Now, viewers, this report by the Finance Ministry also says that in the light of these larger impacts, the ongoing negotiations between India and US, they will be very crucial. Remember, both the sides have been engaging in talks to have a bilateral trade agreement in place. And now the report says those negotiations will be crucial. At the same time, we understand that India is pursuing a diversified trade strategy. It includes its recent deals which it concluded with the UK and some European nations. And remember, India is also in talks with New Zealand and European Union, among others, to sustain its resilient trade performance. Of course, the fact that the impact of all of these negotiations will take some time to be reflected on the ground, and of course the report mentions that it may not fully address the shortfall that will come in terms of exports to the US. So that's the latest we're getting in terms of the impact Donald Trump's 50% tariff will have on Indian economy. Remember, it's an official report that has now been released by the Ministry of Finance. It says that the ripple effects, they will need to be addressed even though the immediate impact has been contained. And in terms of controlling that the larger impact it would have on the Indian economy, the negotiations between India and the US for a bilateral trade agreement becomes very crucial, in fact. Now, viewers, the report here also mentions that secondary and the tertiary effects of the US tariffs on the economy, it could pose a real challenge, in fact. And according to the report, the initial impact on exports has been contained, but the broader effects, they could emerge in several areas. And this includes supply chains, inflationary trends, and also the competitiveness of Indian goods in global market. Again, to reiterate, remember, there are competitors in the form of Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and they have much lesser tariffs compared to India, in fact, now. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist and also founder of KCC Group, is joining me on this story. Good morning, Dr. Kohli. I want to ask you a first question. Now, the report says that the immediate impact of these tariffs, which have been imposed by the US, has been contained, but we could see larger impacts on the economy. Help us understand the immediate and also the larger implications of these 50% tariffs now.
Good morning, Ishita. Good morning to the viewers of News 9. Well, between April and now, a very interesting aspect comes. The exports to US had grown by 20% because the exporters were trying to, clear out the shipments to avoid the repercussions, or to avoid tariff being imposed on their inventories. So obviously there has been a sort of a momentum which has been built, which is why we feel that the impact would be less. But eventually, people coming from the textile industry, apparel industry, people coming from gems and jewelry, people coming from auto spare parts, people coming from marine products. Well, there are millions and millions of people who are employed in this sector. So for a few days, there is some momentum which is formed. But after this momentum settles down, which happened yesterday, in fact, the tariffs, so all the orders have now come to a freeze because the importers in America are negotiating prices with the Indians, but nowhere you get 50% margin. I mean, you can adjust 5-10% here and there. Similarly, Indian exporters can adjust 5-10% here and there. But eventually, you cannot absorb 50% increase. So eventually, the orders would be lost. So when the orders get lost, then the effect of unemployment and closing down of the MSMEs, closing down of certain industries will start showing up, provided they are not able to find alternates. When I say alternates, I mean either they are not able to find alternate markets, which is in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, in Far East, in Southeast Asia, in Australia, or they are able to, find out an alternate vertical, which is these exporters can always start manufacturing for India a different product, considering the GST reforms which are going to happen, very soon. So this is going to boost domestic consumption. So if an exporter has not been able to find an alternate, then obviously there would be an impact. There will be job losses, there will be loss of revenue, there will be loss of taxes also which these exporters were paying. So we cannot rule out the impact, but the impact will start showing up over the next 2-3 weeks, Ishita. That's my take.
All right, Dr. Kohli, I understand that those could be the larger implications of this 50% tariff. Now, I want to understand, a lot of people are saying that this could be an opportunity for India to bring in reforms and also to look for other alternatives. Help us understand what could those reforms be and what are the alternatives that we have at this point.
Well, the biggest reform, Ishita, I feel is the GST, the next gen GST, because the moment you reduce prices of the products in India, and with the proposals which are on the table, it is expected that almost 90% of the stuff which we buy from the market or whatever is on sale will probably go down in terms of prices. So you could always look for a product which has now become easier for a middle class person or a person with lower income to buy. That's one alternate. As far as government reforms are concerned, if I'm sure the viewers of News 9 have heard of AEPC. This is called Apparel Export Promotion Council. This has been in existence for decades now. What this council does is it boosts, business for the garment exporters. Likewise, government might form export promotion councils for other products in the times to come. So these EPCs, as they are called, these EPCs will promote these exporters in other countries. And there are at least 40 countries with which I know that these exporters now are in touch. This includes some of the countries in Europe as well, because the whole world is now, a victim of the US Donald Trump tariff policy, as I would say. The whole world is tariffied, not terrified, as I call it. So every country is looking for alternate, and the whole supply chain management across the world is going to change. So formation of EPCs and encouragement of EPCs by the government. Ministry of Commerce is very actively in touch with export associations, export promotion, bodies which are engaged with the government on a time to time basis to see that which markets can be looked. The other thing could be providing cash aid to some of the, let's say the marine product. The shrimps were being exported from India. Now these are poor, marine farmers. They will probably find themselves stranded. So government can extend cash support, cash aid temporarily. The fourth thing which can be done is extending them credit from the banks, that they could be given credit for exploring alternate markets, for setting up alternate verticals. So these are some of the reforms which the government can do, and we will see them coming on ground, Ishita, in the next few weeks. You will see all these coming onto the ground gradually as we progress into this tariff era of America. And overall, let's not forget that America is not the beginning of the world. America is not the end of the world. There is rest of the world for us. After all, it was just 2.5% of our total GDP, the exports to America. And the entire lot of exports are not impacted. Out of the 86, $87 billion, about 48 to $50 billion has been impacted so far. America has very smartly left out mobile phones, left out APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the generic drugs, as we call them. They have left them out. So I think they can carry on. For the 48, $50 billion, we will obviously look for market. Yes, there will be some job losses, especially for the companies, Ishita, which are completely and only supplying to America, which are export oriented, but only for America. I think they will be worsted. And amongst them, I think the impact will be more severe on the MSMEs, which we call them as micro, small, and medium enterprises, because their pockets are not very deep. Their total capital investment is also low. Larger companies may be able to weather the storm. But smaller companies, I think, will have some temporary bump. They will face a temporary problem, which I'm sure will be resolved if they are actively in touch with their export associations and the government parallelly.